My name is Rebecca de la Cruz, and today I'll be talking about the Popol. The Popol was an ancient Mayan creation myth that talked about the gods' trial and errors while creating life as well as human life. It was created in the 1500s, and the authors were actually kept anonymous as many Spaniards were coming in and destroying important historical and religious documents that the Mayans had. Many stories throughout the Popol are based off creation stories and talking about how the creators originally tried to use wood to make humans, they tried to use mud to make humans, but the thing that eventually stuck was using corn. The relevance that the Popol has to today is that many religions have similar stories to what was in the Popol. The religious story in the Christian religion is Lucifer being taken down. That's also very similar to the twins, which are right here in the photo, them taking down the seven macaw when they used a blow dart to blow a dart into his jaw, which then resulted in him having a toothache and going to get his tooth fixed, and they replaced it with like little tiny pieces of corn. And then they were able to take out his golden eye, which then resulted in him dying. The next thing that is relevant to today is that some of the stories from the Popol have been heard pretty much all over the continent. They've been heard from Honduras to even New Mexico, and even by some tribes that were in like northeastern US or in Canada. Many types of art have also been based off the Popol. Pretty much just paintings or even ballet performances have been based off of it, and even musical performances have been inspired by the Popol and how they wanted to like explain and make it translate to the audience. A story that I liked that was in the Popol was the sunrise story. The sunrise story was like a major part of the creation story actually, and it talks about the greed amongst the four original humans and why humans should be thankful for what they have. In the story, there was four original humans, and they were called Balam Katize, Balam Akabe, Majukutaj, and lastly was Ikbalam. Sorry. They could pretty much do anything a person could do. They could hear, they could talk, they could listen, they could even like hold stuff with their hands, which is pretty cool. Afterwards, the gods asked like how they felt about being alive and everything. And they said that they were thankful and aware of their abilities, and they knew everything from small to large. The gods, however, didn't really like that, but they let it pass for the moment. Soon later, women later arrived, and they became the wives of the four men. After the women arrived, the population, of course, started growing, and they started expanding across the world. But every day, they would go up for sunrise and listen and say a prayer as they waited for the sunrise to rise. As they waited for the sun to rise. In the photo right here, you can see them waiting on top of the hill for the sunrise, and you can see the sunrise just in a little corner right there. But the prayer that they would say pretty much every day before the sun rose was, "Let people be plentiful, let them find joy and not fear, and let them live in peace instead of war." One day, however, the gods delayed the sunrise because they didn't like how the humans were behaving. They were behaving violently, they were being greedy, and they were being competitive amongst each other. The creator and the maker weren't happy, and so they put a mist over the population, which then caused them to lose a lot of common sense. Because a lot of the villagers lost common sense, the four original men took advantage of that and pretty much took control of the villages. Because the sunrise was delayed, the men grew angry with the gods and were on the search for new ones. The gods that they ended up finding were these false gods that were really manipulative and pretty much manipulated the four original men as well as the villagers. After a little while of being led under these false gods, the villagers of the men started to go to war with each other, and they started fighting each other. A lot of the Kishi people started dying because one of the gods, he had the power of fire, and he pretty much withheld that from everybody. And a lot of the people were complaining because they were cold, and then he put a storm through the villages and everything, which ended up killing a lot of people. When the men eventually realized what they had done, they took responsibility for themselves and their behavior, and as well as their god. And they left their gods behind in different places all over the world. However, Maja Kutaj ended up staying with his god and did not leave him. After the men realized that they had been more interested in what they wanted rather than the well-being of their people, they realized that they had already disappointed the gods and there wasn't much that they could do. A quote at the end of the story that I really liked was a poor leader is one who becomes indulgent. And it pretty much sums up the rest of the story because it shows that a lot of the four original men pretty much just listened to what they wanted and how they could advance their power, while the rest of the people were dying and they were not thriving under these new gods that they had. The relevance of the sunrise story is that it was people pretty much wishing for what they didn't have. As I said before, when the four original men said that they knew everything small and large, the gods didn't like that because they thought that they were basically seeing too far ahead of themselves and were pretty much seeing themselves as gods and that they were all knowing. And the gods did not like that because they wanted them to realize that they had to depend on the gods and had to respect them because they gave them life. Another thing that was relevant in the story was that the four original men were pretty much using their power harmfully, and they were using that as an advantage against the people when they had the mist sprayed all over them. And because they were using it harmfully, it ended up leading to the destruction of their villages. Right here, these are some of the sites that I used for some of the Google images, and then also the information that I got from the books and everything about the sunrise story.